All right, all right. I am Peter Alessandria, and for the next 90 minutes, I invite you to be bigger than you think you are. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. So let's take a look at our agenda for this evening, and then we'll jump right into the workshop. Okay, there we are. All right, so we're going to begin this evening, as always, with some announcements, and we're going to look at our recommended reading for this evening. We have our affirmation of the day. We'll have an opportunity for people who are new to introduce themselves and for people to share any victories that they've had over the last week or so. Then we'll listen to an audiobook excerpt from my book, and then we'll have our topic discussion. We'll take a short break at about 8:45, and then we'll come back. We'll work on the assignment, questions and answers, and we'll wrap it up by 9:30. So first announcement, as always, if you don't have a copy of the book, or if you'd like to get an extra copy, they make great holiday gifts. You can get your copy, a signed paperback, by going to my website, bebiggertoday.com/book, and use book 20 at checkout. That's your discount code to save 20% off. I will hand sign a copy of the paperback for you or for somebody you love if you want to give it as a gift. So again, go to the website. You can get that at bebiggertoday.com/book. I am still working on the audiobook, and so it is available now for pre-order at $9.99. That's about 40% off the list price. And both the audiobook and the paperback come with a money-back guarantee. If you don't love it, you just let me know and I'll send you your money back. But I know you're going to love it. And that's at bebiggertoday.com/bookstore. Also, since we're talking about holiday gift giving and shopping and all of that, I have merch available, t-shirts and hats. You can get 20% off by entering the discount code MERCH20 at checkout at bebiggertoday.com/merch. I am available for one-on-one coaching if you're a creative person, a writer, artist, a photographer, and you'd like to work with me directly. I'm available for that. Or if you have a business or you work for a company and you want me to come in and talk to your sales team or your management team about being bigger than they think they are, I'm the guy for that. So just reach out to me through the website. There's a contact form at the bottom of the page. You can contact me for that. Now we're going to start off with our recommended reading for tonight. Right now, this is one of my all-time favorite books. And we talked last week, I mentioned the Conversations with God book series by Neale Donald Walsch. And so there was books 1, 2, and 3 of Conversations with God. Then he came out with Friendship with God. And there are actually a series of books after that, which I'm going to mention in the coming weeks. But I wanted to just single out this book in particular. This book, again, it's one of my all-time favorite books. And it's one of my favorite books in the Conversations with God book series, although they're all great. These books were I think the first book was published in 1995. And I remember reading it when it first came out, and it just rocked my world. It changed my life. And every one of the books after them, including this one, have been very, very powerful. So if you haven't read the Conversations with God book series, or if you haven't read Friendship with God, I mean, just got to love that name, right? The title of that book, Friendship with God. So check it out, available on Amazon. I actually have it on my Audible, so it's available as an audiobook if you want to listen to it, or you can buy a paperback or a hardcover off of Amazon. So check it out. Highly recommend all the Conversations with God book series. All right, and here's our affirmation for today. I love life, and life loves me. Now, this is one of my favorite affirmations. I say it every morning along with about a dozen other affirmations. It's actually in my mind movie. But I love this idea that not only do I get to love my life, but I love the idea that life loves me back. So it's like I get back what I put out. And so this is a very positive, powerful affirmation for me. As I said, I use it all the time. I love life, and life loves me. All right, so this is an opportunity for people to introduce themselves if you're new or if you have a victory that you would like to share with the rest of us. You can unmute your microphone and say hello, check in, introduce yourself. You can comment on the new background, getting in the holiday spirit. You know, it's not even October yet.
It's all beautiful.
Thank you, Cynthia. You want to share a victory? I know you had a lot of stuff going on this week.
I have had a lot of stuff going on, and I'm in Cleveland taking care of medical second opinions, which is a really fabulous thing, and I'm hopeful. I'm your experiences and your audiobook and all that you share makes me hopeful that I can be bigger than I think I am. And the business that my colleagues and I are starting is thrilling, just thrilling. So watch for Sugar X Global. So
Awesome, thank you. Woohoo! Who else? Anybody else want to say hello or share a victory from this past week?
I'll say hello.
Hello, Andrea.
Hi, how are you?
So good to see you.
It's so good to see you. Of course, I'm watching you all the time, kind of like a little bit in stalker mode.
I
So,
know.
but in a good way.
Good, I'm so glad you're here.
Thank
Do you
you.
want to introduce yourself for people so they know who you are?
My name is Andrea Tarr. I live down at the Jersey Shore. I did an internet radio show for a long time. That's how I got to know Peter. I interviewed a lot of people over the years. And now my main job, I work for, I'm the program director at a school for adults. Of course, COVID changed everything, and all my presentations and everything that I was doing in person. Of course, now Zoom is my best friend, like everyone else. And to kind of engage people, because we had to find ways, since we couldn't be in person, I started doing a little video series on Facebook. And I guess I am genuinely surprised, happy though, that has been so well received and has been so successful. And because I was the one doing it, I had to actually edit it and do all that stuff that I never did before. But I learned, and I discovered I was pretty good at it, and that was a victory. So that's my
Awesome.
story.
That's great.
So it's great to see you.
You too. Thank you so much. We're going to have a chance for people to ask questions or share a little later.
Okay, good.
Glad you're here. Thank you. Who else? Anybody else want to say hello or share a victory?
I'll say hello, Peter.
Judy.
Hi there. And just want to say that my video will be off. I'm cooking for the holiday that's coming up, and just have very little time between now and then because of Sugar X Global that I'm involved with also, which is very exciting because I'm walking through a lot of fear. I'm walking through a lot of fear to the other side is what I'm saying. Doing this, you know, it's a reach. It's a real reach. And I'm very lucky. I had a mentor when I became a food addiction counselor, a mentor 3 years ago. And I told her, I don't know if I'm ever going to use this, but will you mentor me? Blah, 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 blah. And she said yes. And then she offered me my first client, so to speak, to do an evaluation on. And I said yes. And she said, do you remember when you said you weren't going to do it? You know, and this is a pretty famous person in the field. And anyway, I'm just walking through it, you know, and listening to someone like you. I can just relate to everything you talk about, being bigger than you think you are, and it's a gift, and thank you everybody else for sharing your story because it's really helpful, so.
Awesome. Great. So let's move back to our presentation here. So we're continuing our discussion of true power. Now, for those who don't have the book or weren't here the last couple weeks, I'm going to talk more about what exactly that is as we go along. But first, what I'm going to do next is play an excerpt from my audiobook on the topic. And that will give you guys a little background, again, if you're not familiar. And then I have a lot to say about this topic more than what I said last week. We just started this topic last week. And we'll go from there. So let's see. Let's play the audiobook.
If we're doing it, we're choosing it. By now we know that taking responsibility means we stop making excuses and blaming other people for our choices. In terms of true power, we can add that we're consciously and deliberately choosing what we think, feel, say, or do. All this means that if we're doing it, or thinking, feeling, or saying it, we're choosing it. Now, for some people, this may seem a bit unfair. After all, don't we sometimes have to do things we really don't want to do? We covered some of this in the last chapter when we spoke about doing things out of obligation or as a sacrifice. Here I would add, where does the have to come from? If we're the only ones who have power over our actions and reactions, and if no one else has the ability to choose what we think, feel, say, or do, then there's nothing present but our own will. Now, I would agree we may not always like the choices we're faced with. And I also get that, at times at least, it can seem like life is unfair. But it doesn't matter if we don't like the alternatives, or even if life actually is unfair. This doesn't change the fact that if we're doing it because we choose to. At this point, you might be thinking something like, well, what if someone holds a gun to our head? Are we doing what we do because we choose to? My response is the same. It doesn't matter the situation or circumstance. If we're doing it, we're choosing it. Let's say you decide to act in accordance with the gunman's wishes. You're still choosing to do what you do. I would remind you that there have been many people in history who, despite having a gun to their head, refused to comply with their captor's wishes. Of course, hopefully none of us will ever be faced with such a distressing situation. Yet living an empowered life means taking full responsibility for all our actions and reactions, period. And while the gun to the head is an extreme example, as most people figure out sooner or later, no one can really force us to do something we don't want to do, at least not with consistently positive results. The same is true of us trying to impose our will on others. Forcing another person to do something they don't want to do rarely turns out well. Governments, bosses, parents, and teachers all eventually realize this. Rather, we need to show the other person that there's some benefit in doing what we want them to do. Yet to convince them of this, we must have their best interests in mind. Most people see through dishonesty, power plays, and manipulations. We may fool them once, but usually not twice. Likewise, telling the other person they can avoid punishment by complying with our wishes is not the kind of benefit I'm talking about. Threatening others is always an attempt to control their behavior, not enhance or improve their lives. At the beginning of this chapter, we talked about how the world at large sees power. A lot of people confuse force, coercion, and/or manipulation with it. They think true power is having power over others. I'm here to say true power is having power over ourselves. When we acknowledge that we're the primary cause of everything we experience in life, we're embracing our true power. Yet most of us do the opposite. We spend our days bouncing around like billiard balls, reacting to what appears to be going on around us. We rarely stop and say, what do I want to experience in this moment? And then make choices designed to create that. Bouncing around at the effective life is a sign that who we think we are is pretty powerless. We're talking about reactors versus creators. When we see correctly, we move from the former to the latter, and our whole life has the potential to change. Giving our power away. In the last chapter, we briefly discussed giving our power away. We said anytime we're blaming other people, being a victim, reacting rather than responding, or, as we'll see in the next chapter, acting out of fear or other negative emotions, we're giving our power away. This means we no longer have control over what we think, feel, say, or do. As we've said, when we place responsibility for these things outside of us, we lose our ability to change them. Doing this consistently makes for a very disempowered and unhappy life. Of course, we can't really give our power away. We've already noted a few times that no one and nothing has power over us. So we're still choosing everything we think, feel, say, and do, but now we're just blaming other people or the situation for those choices. We all do this in one way or another at one time or another. Yet I hope you're beginning to see this doesn't really serve us. A good example from my own life is public speaking. There was a time when I was terrified to speak in public. My hands would shake and I would sweat just thinking about being on a stage. Footnote 10. Depending on who you ask, fear of speaking in public, glossophobia, is in the top 5 fears for most people. It's right up there with fear of heights, fear of death, or fear of losing a job. Back to the text. When I got up there, I would freeze. It would literally feel like my mind had stopped working. I would stutter and stammer and generally have a miserable time of it. Of course, I blamed the situation and other people for my reactions. I was convinced it was because I was on a stage in front of an audience that I felt this way. I could point to the fact that when I was off stage, I didn't have so many issues. This was my proof that the situation was making me feel the way I did. The result was, for years, I routinely avoided anything that involved speaking in front of a large group of people. I was letting the situation dictate for me what I thought, how I felt, and what I said or did. Yet based on what we've said over the last 70 pages or so of this book, it should be clear that the situation was not the cause of my reactions. I was the cause of my reactions. In particular, how I saw myself in that situation dictated all my negative feelings. I ran what was happening outside of me through the internal filter of who I thought I was and arrived at a not-so-positive meaning for the situation. In my mind, I was incompetent, inept, and unattractive. These negative thoughts generated negative feelings, intense fear and anxiety, and the negative feelings in turn generated negative bodily sensations, shaking, sweating, stammering, freezing up, as well as negative avoidance behaviors. I shied away from public speaking. The result was I experienced negative outcomes. I bombed when I did speak in public, and I missed out on opportunities to expand my business and personal life by addressing large groups. Today, I have a totally different relationship with public speaking. I routinely speak to groups and really enjoy it. One week in particular in the summer of 2017 was just awesome. I was invited by a college in Colombia, South America, to speak to their students during their Semana Internacional, International Week. I ended up giving 7 lectures to nearly 1,000 students at 3 different colleges and loved every minute of it. I literally couldn't wait to get up on stage. Footnote 12. Actually, I like to come down off the stage and speak to the audience at eye level. I even sometimes walk to the rear of the room to better connect with the folks hiding out back there. It drives the event's audio-visual personnel crazy, but it really works for me. Back to the text. So what changed? At a certain point, I realized the problem wasn't with the situation. The problem was with me. I became aware that by avoiding public speaking, I was giving my power away. I was letting the situation decide for me how I felt. So I began to consciously and deliberately change how I saw myself. I believed in my mind that I was competent, capable, and even, dare I say, attractive while on stage. Seeing myself differently began the transformation from someone who was terrified to speak in public to someone who really enjoys it. It was my way of taking my power back and no longer letting the situation dictate my experience. As a side note, recall what I said earlier about becoming our own best friends and biggest cheerleaders. For a long time, I beat myself up and made myself wrong for almost everything, including my fear of public speaking. I had very little compassion for myself or any real understanding of the childhood difficulties that were behind my reactions. I thought I was just supposed to be able to get up there and do it. And when I couldn't, I was very, very hard on myself. Today, I can see that in many areas of my life, it was this self-recrimination that was a real source of my fear. I noticed that when I stopped beating myself up so much, there was a lot more I could actually do in my life. I increasingly have compassion rather than contempt for my shortcomings, and by extension, the shortcomings of others. I am not a bad or defective person because I had fear around public speaking. I've also found that the less I beat myself up, the more likely I am to take responsibility for my actions and reactions. The more I take responsibility, the more I embrace my true power, and am able to make lasting changes in my life.
All right, so again, sorry guys, that was we started page 77 in chapter 3. So if you want to go back and take a look at all that again. So what I want to do is just kind of go back over the last few weeks or so. Actually, just do a quick review for all our benefit. Kind of talk to how we got to where we are now, and then I'll talk more about true power. And actually, I want to talk about two experiences I had today, and how it all ties together for me. So we started, the beginning. The first chapter in this book is called in the book, and actually, this was the title of the book originally. The title of the first chapter is "Who Do You Think You Are?" And for me, this is the most important question we can ask ourselves, because what I found, for me at least, is whoever we think we are, whoever I think I am, is exactly who I'm going to end up being in life. Because it's impossible to act in a way that's inconsistent with my predominant thoughts and beliefs about myself. And another way of saying, who do you think you are, is how do you see yourself? And what I've realized for me is that the challenges that I face in my life, it's never the situation that's the problem. It's always and only how I see myself in that situation that's the problem. And it turns out that's really good news, because I often can't change the situation. I can't change other people. I can't change conditions, circumstances outside of me, but I can always change how I see myself. So this realization for me just started this whole train. And the next thing I realized, and this is the subject of chapter 2 in the book, was chapter 2 is called Taking Responsibility. And what occurred to me, and I'm sure I'm not the first person, but this is just something that's been really important for me, is to begin to understand that I'm responsible for my life. Most of my life I thought it was my mother's fault, my father's fault, my girlfriend's fault, my client's fault, the economy's fault, the president's fault. I thought it was everybody else's fault that I was feeling the way I was feeling. And we talked about in chapter 1 and chapter 2 that the way we respond to life is through our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And so I got to see that, I'm responsible. I'm in charge of what I think, feel, say, and do. Now, there's also a really important relationship between those four things. Our thoughts lead to our feelings lead to our words and actions, and our words and actions lead to the outcomes that we experience in life. So if I start with crappy thoughts, I'm going to have crappy feelings. Crappy feelings going to speak crappy words and take crappy actions. Crappy words and crappy actions, crappy outcomes. And the opposite is also true. And that's kind of the point of all of this. By changing how I see myself, by changing the thoughts I think about myself, I start at a different point, and then I have different feelings, and I speak different words, I take different actions. And when I speak different words and take different actions, I have different outcomes. So taking responsibility for my life means that I begin by consciously and deliberately choosing thoughts that serve me, seeing myself in a way that empowers me rather than disempowers me, seeing myself in a way that validates me instead of invalidates me. Now, it turns out it's simple but not easy. Most of us, myself included, I have years and years and years that I've created a self-image that says, I can't do this, I'm no good at that, nobody's going to like this. If I do that, I'm going to feel ashamed. If I don't do that, I'm going to feel ashamed, and on and on and on. I have this whole concept of myself that I carry around with me that directs my life and how I interact with other people and the various conditions that I face on a daily basis. So responsibility, we break it down as respondability, that is the ability to respond. And when we're responding, we're making a choice, we're choosing and making a decision. And that's actually the assignment for tonight. We're going to talk about that after the break. So that comes to chapter 3, which is true power. And what we talked about, is that most people think of power as having power over someone or something else. We think of power as force. We think of power as getting other people to do what we want them to do, or other people getting us to do what they want us to do. It's this external focus, force, manipulation, control. And I come at it from a place and I say that none of that is true power. That's actually force, manipulation, control. That's not real power. For me, true power, the way I define it in chapter 3, is the ability to consciously choose and or change our thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And I'm going to give a couple of real life examples of this in a minute. So that for me is true power, having the ability to choose in the moment how I'm going to respond to life or to a particular person or to a situation. And we talked about this the last few weeks. We talked about the difference between responding and reacting. And when we're reacting, or at least when I'm reacting, it's usually kind of a conditioned reaction. I'm usually not really conscious. It's kind of a knee-jerk kind of thing, or I'm just lashing out, or I'm just, there's not a lot of conscious thought or intention behind it. There's not a lot of choice. Whereas when I respond, usually it implies some kind of intentionality, some kind of consciousness, and direction about what I'm about to say or do in that situation. Now, I think, so we come to this, so this is my definition now of true power, and now the question is how to apply this in our lives. Now, I do want to share this first slide with you guys. So it occurred to me, another word for power is agency. And agency, it's an interesting word actually. It has a couple of different meanings, but this is a definition that I like. It's the ability to act or the capacity to affect a change in circumstances or conditions. Now, the one thing that we know from the discussion so far is there's really only 4 things that I have power over in my life. And that's my thoughts, my feelings, my words, and my actions. Now, by implication, that means I'm powerless, for instance, over other people's thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And when I realized that, it was actually pretty freeing for me. It was pretty liberating because most of my life I had felt responsible for everybody else's emotional state, their moods, how they were doing in life. Not everybody is in the whole world, but the people that I interacted with. And I felt responsible if somebody was unhappy. I thought it was my fault that they were unhappy, and I thought it was my job to fix it. And I spent a lot of time trying to fix unhappy people and finding out that I couldn't really do it. And because I don't have power over somebody else's thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, I have no power over their actions or reactions. So when I finally got that, I realized that it was very liberating in a sense. But then I had to start taking responsibility for my own thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, because I wanted everybody else to be responsible for how I was feeling. If I was happy, it was because of something that you did or didn't do. And if I was unhappy, it was because of you. Or whatever. It could be the weather. Something was always having an influence on me that I could not control. And my moods and my feelings and my actions and my reactions were all determined by what was going on out there, instead of understanding that it's controlled by what's going on in here. And the way I describe it is we have a filtering process. We have an internal filter. And what happens is information from the outside world, from the situation or wherever we're at in that moment, the data comes in through our senses, and then the mind has a filter. It processes that data. And that filter is based on our concept of ourselves, how we see ourselves, who we think we are. And then what happens is we take that data, pass it through that filter, and then what we do is we give the situation a meaning. And it's to that meaning that we react. We're not actually reacting to what's going on out there. We're reacting to our subjective interpretation of what's going on out there. All right, so this is really important because as I change how I see myself, as I change who I think I am, I have a different reaction. I give a different meaning to a situation, and then I have a different reaction or different response to that situation. Now, a good example is what you heard in the audiobook tonight. I talked about how for years I was terrified of public speaking. I mean, I couldn't think of anything worse than being on a stage in front. I didn't even have to be on a stage. I could just be at the front of a room with a bunch of people. And it was awful. I mean, I was so self-conscious. I was so nervous. I would sweat and I would stutter and I would stammer, and it was brutal. And to the point where, you know, I missed opportunities to expand my law business when I was a lawyer, to expand my photography business, you know, just to meet more people, to be more interactive and proactive in my life, because I was so afraid of public speaking. Now, I was convinced that it was the situation that was causing me to feel this way, because when I wasn't on a stage, I had issues, but I wasn't stuttering, I wasn't stammering, I wasn't sweating, I wasn't having that visceral response that I had when I got in front of people. So I was convinced that it was the situation that was making me feel the way I was feeling. And the only thing I could do was to avoid those situations so I wouldn't feel that way. And then as I started to do this work, and I started to begin to look at this question of, you know, this idea that who I think I am impacts everything, how I see myself influences everything in my life, I began to apply it to that situation. And I began to realize, you know, it's not really the situation that's causing me to feel the way I feel. What's happening is I'm thinking all these negative thoughts about myself. Without even really being aware of it, I'm thinking all these negative thoughts like I'm not attractive, like I'm not competent, like I don't have anything meaningful to say, like people are not going to like me, people are going to reject me, I'm going to feel embarrassed, I'm going to feel ashamed. And that was the mindset that I was approaching these public speaking engagements with. And as we said, thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to words and actions lead to outcomes. So by starting with this horrible, these negative and highly limiting ideas about myself, I created the negative feelings, the negative words and actions, and the negative outcomes. And so I began to consciously and deliberately, I began to exercise my true power by consciously thinking thoughts that were positive about myself. Positive thoughts, empowering thoughts, new beliefs about me, questioning the old beliefs. Remember, something really important to say when we notice that we're in that negative loop, a great question to ask out loud is that really true? Is it really true that I'm unattractive? Is it really true that I'm not capable? Is it really true that I don't have something important to say or valuable to say? Is it really true that people are not going to like me? Now, I have a whole history, really a lifetime of experiences that prove that those thoughts and beliefs are true. But then the next step is to realize, well, what if the experiences follow the beliefs? What if the beliefs came first, and then I created the situations, or I attracted the people, or somehow, without even being aware of it, I orchestrated these negative events that reflect back to me my thoughts and beliefs about myself? I personally believe that's the way it works. Now, eventually, it just becomes this feedback loop, and it's just, you know, the experience feeds the belief feeds the experience. And our job is to stop that train. And the way we stop that train is to, one, become conscious, become aware, listen to our thinking, listen to what we say to other people, listen to when we're complaining, when we're blaming, when we're making excuses, listen to ourselves, and become conscious, become aware, and say, wow, is that really serving me right now? Is that really true? Is that thought about myself really going to move me forward or hold me back? So this is a massive call to conscious living, to being present and aware in the moment, what's going on in here, what's going on in here, and what's coming out of here. And what's coming out of here. Listen to yourself. To listen to myself. So that's the beginning. So I began to question this idea that I wasn't a good speaker, that I didn't have anything of value to offer. And I started, this was right around the time that my photography business was starting to move forward, and I was starting to win awards for my photography, which was a completely, I've talked about that, completely mind-blowing experience. And then I got some photos published in newspapers and magazines, And then I started selling photos, and I was like, wow, so maybe I'm not who I think I am, or at least I'm not who I used to think I was, because I'm having these new experiences. My life is changing. And then I started to look at this thing about public speaking, and I realized, this is an opportunity now for me to present myself to groups, talk about my photography, talk about, everything that I'm working on. And I started to do it little by little. And it was a lot of just local photography groups, where I would get up in front of the room and I would show my photos and I would talk about myself. I would talk about my career because, I have a not unique, but kind of an interesting career trajectory in that I used to be a lawyer and then I lost my law business and I decided to pursue my passion for photography. So I have a story and I have something of interest and value to people. But until I realized that, until I accepted that, until I told myself that that's what was true, I didn't believe that. And I had all these reasons why I didn't have anything important to say. Nothing, was going to help other people. So I consciously and deliberately started telling a new story to myself about myself. And I started speaking. I started doing these little speaking engagements. And at first I was semi-terrified, not as bad as I used to be, but I still had a lot of those old reactions, but I just kind of pushed through it. And the important thing was I didn't beat myself up afterwards if I didn't do it perfectly or if I messed something up or whatever. So in addition to questioning my negative thoughts and beliefs about myself, I also began to be nicer to myself. I began to move from being my own worst enemy to my own best friend. And I began to encourage myself, and I began to esteem myself, and I began to acknowledge myself for a job well done, or for at least trying, And slowly it got better and better to the point where at a certain point I realized I was in front of a group, I don't remember how many people, it was a room full of people, maybe 40, 50 people. I wasn't nervous, and I had a great time. I talked for almost 2 hours. And I was like, wow. It was such a different experience. So it kind of reconfirmed what I was thinking all along, which was it really had nothing to do with what was going on out there. And I've shared this before. It wasn't somebody else's rejection that I was afraid of. It was my own rejection. It was my own self-recrimination that was creating all that fear inside of me. And that's what was in my way. So as I changed my idea about myself, as I changed how I saw myself, who I thought I was, as I changed how I treated myself, being nicer to myself, being kinder to myself, being more supportive of myself, my whole experience changed. And the culmination was what I shared about in the audiobook tonight, and I talked about this a few weeks ago. In 2017, in August, and I don't really recommend going to Colombia, South America in August. It was the hottest place I've ever been in my life. But anyway, in August of 2017, I got invited to go down to Colombia, South America to speak. And originally, it was only supposed to be one college, and only 1 or 2 times. They liked me so much that they sent me to 2 other colleges. And I did like 7 lectures. I was only supposed to do 2 or 3. And I loved it. It was great, and I had an experience. I'm not going to talk about it again, but I shared about it a few weeks ago in the workshop, where I just had this amazing experience. The night before I left Colombia, one of the students came up to me and shared something with me, and it just blew me away. So not only did I enjoy what I was doing, but I had a positive impact on other people. When I started to get out of my way, get out of my self-consciousness, get out of my self-hatred, it freed up my energy to be of service to other people, to make a difference in my own life and the lives of other people. Getting out of my world which says, I can't do this, they're not going to like me, I don't have what it takes, it opened up a whole new world. All right, so again, agency, it's the ability to act, the capacity to affect change in circumstances or conditions. Now the thing is, and this is what I want to talk about from today. So I had two things go on today that spun me out. And I got to see that by not exercising my true power versus exercising my true power, how my day went as a result. The first situation, just really briefly, as if I don't have enough cameras here, I was looking to set up another camera for tonight, and I got some equipment, and it was a cable, and it didn't work, and I couldn't get it to work. And this is a big thing with me. You know, I use my problem solving, I use my intellect really to keep myself safe is what it comes down to. And when I can't solve a problem, I feel unsafe. I feel like I'm not going to be okay. And, you know, I'm the computer guy in the family. Whenever anybody has a problem with their computer or their electronics, they call me. At one time, I actually used to build my own computers. I don't do that anymore. But, you know, I'm pretty good with this stuff. And when I couldn't figure it out, I felt like I was losing control. You know, I felt like I couldn't control what was happening in front of me. And I felt it. I felt the adrenaline going, and I felt anxiety. And you guys don't have it yet, but I'm working on the second edition of the book. As I've been working on the audiobook, I've been revising this, and I've made so many revisions that I'm actually going to do a second edition. And one of the things that I'm adding into the second edition, that's not in the first edition, but it's kind of something I've been looking at the last few months, is there's these two questions that, for lack of a better word, plague us as human beings in almost every situation that we find ourselves in. The first question is, am I safe? And the second question is, am I loved? And I can see that in every situation in my life where I feel fear, anxiety, whatever, you know, it goes back to this core question. And so today, for some reason, because I couldn't control what was happening, I couldn't find the solution, I didn't feel safe. And that was, and it was the thoughts that were generating the feelings of the lack of safety, the lack of control. And then, you know, my body took over, and I was forcing, trying to get, you know, trying to make it work, and just getting more and more frustrated, and so on. So it was interesting for me to notice in that moment that I was not consciously choosing thoughts that were empowering me. You know, I was thinking, this is not going to work. I can't do this. Why can't I do this? You know, it's something I can't control. You know, it was just this stream of negative thoughts, and it created this reaction in me. Now, the good news is I got over that pretty quickly. You know, I'm going to get it worked out. So in the next couple of weeks, you guys are going to see another camera. I'll get that done. But then the second problem came up, and this also triggered a core issue for me. What happened was signing up a new client for some photography work, and I was asking them to send me a deposit for the work that I was going to do. And they emailed me back and said, "Great, is there a way for me to pay online? Is there a link or something you can send me so I can pay you?" And without getting into all the details, that's not set up on this particular photography website. And so I normally would take a credit card or whatever by phone or by email and just process it that way. But what happened was, I realized when they asked me for this, I felt inferior. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing because I didn't have it set up in that moment for them. And I immediately regressed. We talked about regression. And I went to that place where, oh no, I made a mistake. They're not going to like me. They're not going to want to hire me. They might yell at me. This is the mind of the 6-year-old that kicked in that moment. And it was triggered by this email, which had nothing to do with any of this, but this is where my mind went with it. And I immediately went into overdrive to try to find a solution to fix this. Because if I don't do things right, see, when I was a little kid, if I didn't do something right, there were ramifications, and it was not pleasant. And I carry that into my adult life. It was conditioned into me that if I did something wrong, it was going to suck. You know, I was going to be shamed, I was going to be punished, I was going to be ridiculed. And so it's visceral now. It wasn't even really, there wasn't a conscious thought. It was just all of a sudden this sensory input came in. Oh no, they're not going to like me. Oh no, I did something wrong. Oh no, I'm bad. And it immediately triggered those feelings. And then I went into overdrive to try to fix this problem. And make a long story short, I went through this whole thing with tech support on this website, and it was just, and the good news is I was aware in the moment that I was going there, that I was going down this road of feeling helpless, of feeling powerless, of feeling like I was going to be punished, of feeling like I was bad. I couldn't quite stop the train in that moment, but shortly after that, and I did get it resolved. I actually got everything done. I sent a link with the invoice. But I had to come down off of that, and the adrenaline was going again, and I could see, I was like, wow, this is such old behavior. The good news is I didn't beat myself up for it. I didn't make myself wrong. I tried to comfort myself in a healthy way. Times like that, I would go for an addiction, some kind of addictive, compulsive behavior to soothe that little child in me that was so afraid he was going to be rejected or punished or made wrong. And I was able to talk myself down and come down off the ledge from that and to recognize that it's going to be okay. What I was reading in that email was not about them, it was about me. I'm an adult. I can solve this problem and it's going to be fine. It's going to be a non-issue. In fact, I'm expecting by the time this workshop is done, I will have gotten paid. But it was so interesting to see how it's still now, and this is the good news. The good news is this is the first time in a long time that I've gone down that road. There used to be a time when this was almost a daily occurrence for me. It was almost every day there was something else that was just triggering me and that I was just going down that rabbit hole. And I would make myself sick with stress, with anxiety and self-hatred. So the victory that I want to share with you guys tonight is, I didn't go there. And I got a chance to take care of myself in a healthy way, not make myself wrong, and to bring some conscious awareness to the moment and begin to see myself differently in that moment and treat myself differently. All right, we're going to take a break in a minute. I just want to share this other slide with you guys. So again, this is the idea of taking our power back, not giving our power away. It's not what happens to us or what someone else does. It's how we respond or react that matters. All right, the problem is not out there, which is really good news because the solution is in here. So it's not what's going on around us that's the problem. It's how, in that moment today when I saw myself as that little kid who was going to be punished for doing something wrong, that had nothing to do with that other person. It had nothing to do with the company that I was calling customer support, tech support to get help from. Had nothing to do with any of that. It was all going on in here. So it was a good reminder of that. All right, and we get to choose. Course in Miracles says there are only two emotions, love or fear. And everything that we do that's positive is based in love. Everything that we do that's negative is based in fear. Now the next chapter, in chapter 4, I'm going to talk all about fear. We're going to spend a month talking about fear. And then we're going to spend another month talking about love. So that's coming. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Let's take a break. We're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to play this song. So if you're new or you're watching this at home, I'm about to play a song. Oh, wait, let's look at the workshop exercise, the exercise for tonight. So when we come back, we can talk about this. What does it mean to make a choice or decision? And if I'm doing it, I'm choosing it, agree or disagree, and why? All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk about those questions. And then as I was saying, in a minute, I'm going to play a song. This was the song that I started the workshop with. If you're watching at home, I can't actually put this up on YouTube, so I have to cut the video here. But the song is by Robbie Williams. It's called Love My Life. I do, well, you're not here, so you can't see it, but I put the lyrics on screen. It's a really powerful song. It's filled with wonderful affirmations. So I'm going to play that now. I'm going to play that at the end as well. But again, I can't upload it to YouTube without getting the wrath of Google, the wrath of YouTube. So it's Love My Life by Robbie Williams. And then when we come back, you guys will have a chance to talk about the assignment, and we'll go from there. All right, we are back. So let's go back to our assignment for tonight. An opportunity to hear from you guys, what you think. You can, so it's just really, I mean, a little background for this. So we've been talking all along, we've been talking about choosing, consciously and deliberately choosing thoughts, feelings, words, and actions that serve us. You know, we're making decisions all the time. I think this is what I didn't realize, and I think a lot of people don't realize, is we are constantly making choices and decisions. Like, that's what life is. Life is making choices and decisions, and then what happens is there's a consequence for that choice or decision, and that consequence comes back to us in one form or another, and then we make another choice or decision based on that. You know, we're constantly choosing, we're constantly deciding. And the example that I use in the book is just a metaphor, but if you think about a painter, you know, a painter, she picks her brushes, she picks her canvas, she chooses the colors that she wants to use, and then she covers that canvas stroke by stroke, and each stroke is a choice, it's a decision. What color, how thick, how thin, you know, what direction, you know, it's a whole series of choices. And at the end of that series of choices, you have a finished painting. Well, it's the exact same thing with our lives. You know, we're constantly making choices, and we're creating our lives by the quality of the choices that we make, the quality of the decisions that we make. And I got news for you. If we're not doing that consciously, you know, we're asking for trouble. We're certainly not going to get where we think we want to go if we're not consciously and deliberately guiding our life by the choices and decisions that we make. So it just got me thinking, you know, what does it mean to make a choice? Now, I have a lot to say about this, but I want to hear from you guys first. And then the second part of the assignment here, if I'm doing it, I'm choosing it. You know, again, the example I gave in the audiobook tonight was, you know, somebody with a gun to their head. It's my belief, I know it sounds, maybe it doesn't, but it may sound extreme, but even in that moment, we're still choosing. And it has to be that way, because the minute I stop taking responsibility for my choices, I'm giving my power away. And when I give my power away, I am powerless to create the life that I want. It's that simple. Now, again, if what's really important to remember is we're not confusing responsibility with blame. Taking responsibility doesn't mean I beat the crap out of myself for my bad choices. That's not taking responsibility. That's self-hatred. I say in the book, guilt is just another word for self-hatred. So whenever I feel guilty, whenever I feel bad, whenever I feel not good enough, none of that is taking responsibility. That's about hating myself. So taking responsibility is a good thing. It's a positive thing. And of course, then it's forgiving myself for the choices, for the decisions that don't work out the way I want them to go. And that's actually a really big part of the equation. All right, so I want to hear from you guys. So who wants to go first? Who wants to talk about what it means to make a choice or decision, or if I'm doing it, I'm choosing it?
Well, I'll put in my 2 cents.
Great.
So I have a big, like a card, and it's actually on my refrigerator, and it says choices and consequences. And I also have a tattoo that says choose wisely. So I'm like all about the, life is a series of choices and consequences. It always has been. And however we grow up, we are simply, all of our choices makes us what we are today, for good or bad, right? So I absolutely believe that.
So what does it mean, Andrea, for you to make a choice or decision? How do you know that you've decided something?
Yeah, well, that's not always so black and white, actually. So in my mind, to answer the question, I think, well, I'm using my powers of observation or my intellect to say, well, again, choices and consequences. If I do this, then this will happen. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is that going to move me forward or send me back? And if I, mentally weigh out the choices and consequences, for me, that helps me make a decision. Now, having said that, so then when I feel my comfort level, okay, yes, this is what I'm going to do, whether it's in work or my life or whatever else it is. And then, of course, sometimes you say, well, I thought I did the right thing. It turns out that I didn't make a good choice. And now there are going to be consequences. But I give myself permission to say, well, choose again. You're not done. You can always make another choice. You can always go to a plan B. You're not stuck. And I have to tell you that a lot of the things that you were talking about earlier, I wrote something down. For me, you were talking about the imposter syndrome. And oddly enough, I'm participating in something tomorrow night, and it's about the imposter syndrome and your inner critic. I felt like you were speaking right to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So, but let's come back. So one of the things, something that I heard in what you said a minute ago. First of all, I want to say this, just for anybody, consequences are not always negative. There could be a positive consequence. And there is a difference between consequences and punishment. All right? A consequence is a natural result. Punishment is something that we do to ourselves or somebody else does to us. The next thing I want to say is that I don't remember exactly where it is in the book. It might be in chapter 3. I talk about how there's actually no such thing as a bad choice or a wrong decision if we're willing to do 2 things. Anybody want to guess what those 2 things are?
Learn from it.
That's one. What's the second one? It's the F word.
Oh, but there's so many of those.
Forgive ourselves.
Oh, forgiveness. Yeah.
Forgive ourselves. Because what happens when I learn from my mistakes and I forgive myself for them, then guess what? If you listen to an interview with almost any successful person out there, you're going to hear how they made mistakes, how they had setbacks, how they had challenges. And it turned out those were a blessing in disguise. Something great came out of that situation. They got moved in a new direction. They looked at a problem differently. They had some kind of a breakthrough. They got to see themselves in a new way. They got to see their company in a new way. But the only way we can do that is if we're willing to learn from our mistakes and forgive ourselves for them. If I'm beating myself up because that decision, didn't work out or there was a negative consequence, I'm not going to see the gift in it. It's not going to move me forward in the way it was intended. I mentioned this, I mentioned it in the book, and I mentioned this a couple of months ago in the workshop. The story of Thomas Edison. 10,000 tries to make a light bulb. And when he was asked, he said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that didn't work." I mean, think about that. What if he gave up after 9,999? We'd all be sitting in the dark, or we'd have candles or something, So it's like, it's reframing all of this, and if I'm willing to forgive myself, if I'm willing to be my own best friend, if I'm willing to be my own biggest advocate, if I'm willing to be my own biggest cheerleader, if I'm willing to love myself when I least like who I'm being, then I'm going to find gifts in every experience. There's going to be something positive that comes out of everything. I'm going to learn something about myself. I'm going to learn something about other people, and I'm going to be able to use that to make my life and other people's lives better. But I can't get to the gift if I'm beating myself up for messing things up. When I was a kid, it was not okay for me to make a mistake. There were consequences. There was punishment. It wasn't consequences. There was punishment. And so I became afraid to try anything. I became afraid to do anything. I talked about, I don't know if it's in the book, it's chapter 4. The first job I had after law school was with a big law firm in Los Angeles. Entertainment firm. It was actually a great job. And I was so terrified that I was going to make a mistake or do something wrong. And I was terrified to ask for help because I thought if I asked for help, it meant I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't deserve to be there if I didn't know what I was doing. And that served to just paralyze me. I couldn't do anything. I was terrified to take on a work assignment. I was terrified, and eventually I got let go. I got labeled as somebody who was really smart, but somebody who had a really bad attitude. But what they didn't know, and that what I didn't even know at the time, was I was just terrified. I was paralyzed with fear, and so I couldn't function. And there was nothing in my frame of reference to say it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to not know what you're doing. When somebody said that to me once, they said, "That's all right if you don't know what you're doing. You'll figure it out." It was like, wow. All right, so that was great, Andrea. Let me also, so the second thing I want to say about all this is, how do we know if we made a choice or decision? So the way that we know that we made a choice or decision, and this is where actions speak louder than words. All right? If I take, you said, Andrea, the word you said is if I do something. If I take action that's in alignment with that decision, and I continue to be consistent about that, then I know I've made a decision. And it's so actions speak louder than words. It's one thing to say, I talk about my own battles with addiction, addictive compulsive behavior. I spent a lot of time in 12-step programs, and you hear people all the time talking about how they're going to stop doing whatever it is they're doing. And then 2 weeks later, they're doing it again. So it's not the word, and I've done that. I can still do that. So it's not the words, it's the actions. It's how we put the words into action. you know, and it's okay to change our minds. It's okay to make a new choice. It's okay to make a new decision. Again, I love what you said, Andrea, which is we always get another chance. I didn't really believe that for most of my life, that there was going to be another chance. If I don't believe there's going to be another chance, then there's going to be a lot of anxiety. There's going to be a lot of stress. There's going to be a lot of unpleasantry associated with that situation. So it's great. Thank you so much, Andrew. You want to say anything else about it?
No, let somebody else have a turn.
Okay, great. Thank you. Who else?
Hello, Peter. It's Barbara.
Hello, Barbara.
Hi, how are you? As you were talking, I was thinking, I have other things written down, like a choice is making a decision, when you got to pick from column A or column B, but and then you make your decision. All of a sudden it came to me, and for years, I guess I had this. Do you ever remember people saying sitting on the fence? And, you have to make a decision. You have to make a choice, things like that. It just brought that up. And to be perfectly honest, it was that long ago that I can't remember if they said choice or decision. But I remember myself saying, well, I want to sit on this fence and I want to think about it, because it was like, or, you think about the fork in the road. Are you going to go this way or that way? And, that came up many, many times in my life. And I think, it was like I made a decision. And when I finally, when I did make a decision, I was fine with it. So, I understand what you're, getting at, where you're trying to define choice and define decision. And they certainly are connected. And then I wrote down Supreme Court decision. So someday I'll make a really Supreme Court decision. I'll go, woo, woo. But, that has passed. So I must have overcome, the dilemma of sitting on the fence. And I'm sure a lot of people feel this way. It's great to make a decision. It's great to have choices, and it's great to make the decision. Did I do okay?
Good.
Okay.
So yeah, a couple of things. So,
Okay.
and now it just went out of my head. Fork in the road.
Yeah.
So that is true. We when we make a decision, again, this comes up a lot in recovery, 12-step, when we make a decision, it means we're going in a different direction. It's quite literally that we're taking that fork in the road, and in a sense, there's really no going back, and so, and then sitting on the fence, I have a picket fence around my house, and it's really pointy. So I don't want to sit on that fence too long, personally.
Right.
But on the other hand, it is, I go both ways with this. I mean, sometimes making any decision is better than making no decision, in a way.
I have heard that. Yeah.
On the other hand, I think it's important to think things through. And one of the things that's been helpful for me is to have people to bounce things off of. If I'm relying totally on my own thinking, it's really helpful to have other people to run stuff by, So for a long time with my photography business, when I was starting out, I had an action partner. And that was somebody I spoke to every day, only about 20 minutes, but we checked in every morning and we went through what we were going to accomplish that day for our business. And we were there sounding boards. We were there to, bounce ideas off of. I'm now part of a mastermind group. So there's 5 of us that meet once a week for an hour. And again, we're bouncing ideas off each other. We're getting input on stuff. We're, getting direction, support. So that's helpful, instead of trying to figure it all out on my own. And then there was one other thing. Again, for me, it's just, there really is, see, I was so afraid of making the wrong choice that I didn't choose anything, but not choosing is still choosing. Not doing something is the same as making a choice to not do something. So when I started, I have a friend, we talk a lot, and I say to her, you make the stakes so high that you don't want to do anything. You got to bring the stakes down. You got to make it, it's not life or death. But we make things life or death, and then we become paralyzed because we don't want to make the wrong choice. So if I'm willing to learn from my mistakes and forgive myself for them, there really is no such thing as a bad choice or wrong decision. I'm going to learn something that's valuable, or I'm at least going to have an opportunity to love myself. And that's never a bad decision. That's never a bad choice. So it's reframing the whole thing, not making the stakes so high, asking for help, input from other people, not trying to do it alone. Anything else, Barb? You want to say anything else on all that?
No, but only that you've mentioned it, and it's almost like it's really a big part of growing up. Maturing, and like you said, and growing up. And, and that's why I guess it was that long ago, because it's nice that I don't struggle with it as much as I used to. I've grown up.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that.
Okay.
That's what an adult does.
Yeah.
An adult makes decisions and takes responsibility for those decisions.
Right. So
But
good topic.
Since responsibility is not the same as blame, it's actually a good thing to take responsibility for our choices. It empowers us. Now I want to get to the second part B. If I'm doing it, I'm choosing it. Anybody want to chime in on that? Because that's loaded. I know for me, most of my life I felt like other people were making me do things I didn't want to do. I was powerless, and this was the A train. If you ride the subways in New York, the A train. It was the A train to resentment. Feeling like somebody was making me do something I didn't want to do. Somebody had power over me. I was resentful. I was angry. It was everybody else's fault. I was a victim in all my relationships, or most of my relationships, because I could not take responsibility. It was always, they were making me feel this way by making me do something I don't want to do. And again, I talk about, look, as I said in the excerpt from the audiobook, we may not like the choices. I get that. And in some cases, it may be unfair what we're being asked to do. Life isn't always fair, but it doesn't matter. If we're doing it, we're choosing it. Nobody can usurp my will. Now, what I found to be helpful in these situations is to, again, reframe it. So I can find a way to do something that I think I don't want to do. Now, there's also a reason I don't want to do it, usually. And the reason is usually that I'm afraid. I associate some negative consequence or some negative outcome with doing that thing. And it could be as simple as, I'm going to miss my favorite TV show because I got to go pick up somebody from the train station or whatever. Or, I got to do something for my family, or, but there's some negative consequence that I associate with that. And I can reframe that. I can say, wow, all right, I can either look at it as they're infringing on my personal time, or I can look at it as I'm being of service to somebody. I'm picking somebody up at the train station or the airport, or I'm, whatever I'm doing, I can change it around so it's something positive for me and for the other person. But this is why the question of who do you think you are is so important. If who I think I am in that situation is a victim, if who I think I am in that situation is powerless, if who I think I am in that situation is someone who's being forced to do something against my will, I'm not interested in reframing that in a positive way. I just want to be right about them being wrong. I just want to be right about them being jerks. I just want to be right about them being inconsiderate or whatever. All right, I'm done. Anybody else want to talk about if I'm doing it, I'm choosing it?
I do. Thank you for this topic. my husband and I are talking about moving, and I have framed it as he wants to move. Not me. He wants
Nice.
to move. And I'm preparing to move. So it would seem that I'm choosing it because I'm not defending against it. I'm not saying, oh, no, that's a bad idea. I'm actually choosing to do it, to do the preparation to make the move. And people say, well, where are you moving? We haven't decided yet. So we have a few possibilities, and we don't have any crush of time that says we have to move at a certain time, possibly. But we have the opportunity to put our things in storage and be free to meander around until we find a place that we want to settle. So I am choosing to move. Thank you.
Great. And what is that? That's taking our power back. See, when I'm no longer making somebody else responsible for my choices, guess what? Now I have the ability, true power is the ability to choose and or change my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And when I change my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions, my whole experience of life changes. And that's the only way my experience of life is going to change, by me taking responsibility for my thoughts, feelings, words, and actions. And what I'm doing in that moment is I'm taking my power back. Now, I still may have to set boundaries with other people. I may have to take care of myself in my relationships with other people. This is part of being an adult, I can negotiate. So if I really want to watch that show, this is a terrible example because I haven't watched TV in 10 years, but if I really want to watch something on TV and somebody wants me to do something, I can negotiate and say, gee, I can't do it now, but how about in an hour or 3 hours or tomorrow or whatever? So that's part of being an adult, negotiating, taking care of myself in my relationships by asking for what I want or need, not that it's their job. See, it's nobody else's job to take care of my wants and needs, but it is my job to make them known so we can negotiate, so we can come together and find a common ground that works for both parties. This is one of the things I learned as a lawyer, Actually, I'm not going to go there. So it's my job to take care of myself in that moment, and that's how I get my power back. And I think it's in chapter 6, I talk about resentment. And what I've learned from me is that resentment means only one thing, usually only one thing. And that is, I have not done what I needed to do to take care of myself in that situation, and now I'm blaming somebody else for that. And the anger that I think I feel towards them is really misdirected anger that I feel towards myself for not taking care of myself. So going into all my relationships now, like with a new client, I make sure up front that I do what I need to do to take care of myself in that situation. I get all the information, what am I committing to? What are their expectations? What's the timeline? I learned, actually many years ago, I never, ever ask the client when they need something done. I never ask them that. I tell them when I can get to it. Because the minute I start asking for their timeline, then I'm no longer in control of my schedule, and me not being in control of my schedule creates all kinds of stress, unmanageability in my life. So it's my job going into that situation to make sure that I'm taken care of. And then guess what? I don't feel resentful later. There's nothing, I don't feel like they've done me wrong or they didn't care about me or whatever, because I cared about myself going in. Or, sometimes things change in the middle of the relationship. You got to renegotiate. So that's what adults do. And it's not to make excuses for somebody else's bad behavior. We're not condoning inappropriate behavior by others. But we are saying that my experience is my responsibility. And this is true power. Imagine, I don't know what the situation, let me think of the situation for me. You know, imagine that you're in a situation that always triggers you. So for a long time, whenever I went to the grocery store, I go to ShopRite, if somebody in front of me was really slow at the checkout, or they had a lot of coupons or whatever, you know, I would just get, it would just make me crazy, you know? And I would blame them. It was their fault that I was feeling this way because they're so slow and they're so cheap and they're so whatever. I was judging them, you know, the whole thing. And imagine now I go into that same situation and I see that person in front of me. First of all, now I get into a different line. I've gotten pretty good at picking those people out with the coupons. But sometimes you can't always choose your line. So, but now I see that it's like, oh, I get to decide in this moment how I respond to this situation. That's true power. If I can stand in that line and not be upset and actually be sending positive energy, you know, instead of judging them, you know, and you know, looking at what the food they're buying and judging them for the food that they buy and all the things that I do, if I can send positive energy their way, if I can bless them, or better yet, just get my head out of somebody else's business, I can have a whole different experience in the same situation that used to drive me crazy. That's true power. Making a different choice in the moment, taking responsibility for my feelings, my reactions, my actions. That's what power is. All that other stuff that we call power, it's coercion, it's manipulation, forcing somebody else to do something they don't want to do. It never works, not long term. A lot of you guys are parents. I'm sure you know that doesn't work. Teachers, bosses, you know, you can only force somebody to do something they don't want to do for so long, and then it goes to shit. All right, we're running late on time, so anybody else want to chime in? All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to play the song one more time. It's 3.5 minutes, actually. The lyrics are on screen. So again, if you're at home, we're listening to Love My Life by Robbie Williams. Get it on iTunes or Amazon Music. Lynn, you want to say something?
I just want to say, Yahoo, you for your victory this
Woohoo!
Yahoo! Right, good.
Thank you. So I'm going to play the song again. The lyrics are on screen. Sing along if you like, although keep your microphone muted. And then when we come back, we'll say our final goodbyes. All right? All right. Woohoo! So that's our song. And so as always, tell your friends. If you like what we're doing, all are welcome. If you want a copy of the book, so this is the first edition. I only have a few of these left, and I actually hoping maybe someday there'll be a collector's item. But I do have a few more left. If you would like a copy to give somebody for a gift or something like that, remember it's book 20 at checkout. You save 20%, and then just let me know who you want me to sign it to. I'll sign it. Still working on the audiobook. I'm making good progress, but I'm still a few weeks away from that till that's completed. And I think that's it. So tell all your friends. You guys, you know, invite people. It's great. The registration process, I think it's gotten easier. People seem to be able to register. And think that's it. Anybody want to say anything before we go?
Thank you. Woohoo!
Woohoo! You're welcome.
No, just saying goodnight.
All right.
And then thank you too.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night and thank you, Peter. It was great to see you.
You too, Andrea. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so 8 o'clock next Wednesday. Oh, and the video, this recording should be up by tomorrow afternoon, in case you want to watch it again or send it to somebody. And all the prior workshops have been recorded, so you can see them all on my website. All right, guys, have a great night.
Bye.
Be bigger than you think you are in everything you do.